This video is sponsored by the adventure Prey of the Black Wolf, now on DM's Guild. Avatar is great for a lot of reasons. Its lovable characters, its exquisite world building, and of course, its masterpiece in structural storytelling. But in this video, I'm going to look at it through the lens of RPG adventure design. We're going to see how my favorite episode, The Library, works as a perfect D&D adventure, from the intro in a tavern to the classic 5-room dungeon, then ending with a cliffhanger that gets the players not able to wait for the next session. The DM had been paying attention to the group's out-of-game chat. Some of the players wanted a break from the main storyline, and Sokka's player had been whining about needing information about the bad guys. So when the party wandered into town, essentially looking for an adventure, the DM had one literally bump into them. The professor has a lot going for him as an NPC, and he does a few things right off the bat that instantly get the party to take a liking to him. Number one is he thinks they're cool.
Oh, truly fascinating. That is one for the journal.
I think we as DMs have a tendency to have the denizens of our world be indifferent, if not outright hostile to the player characters. Very rarely, at least for me, the players get to experience an NPC being enthralled by their characters. That means when there is someone who takes a shining to them, they love it. The second thing the professor does is he offers the party exactly what they want. The library is an obvious change of pace, and it's a place for Sokka to find his intelligence.
Alright, we'll finish our vacations and then we'll look for Sokka's intelligence.
Lastly, what the NPC wants to find the library is just out of his reach. When the professor explains the problem he has, the one that's also keeping the players from achieving their newfound goal, he doesn't outright ask for their help.
Of course, there's the matter of finding it. I've made several trips into the Siwang Desert and almost died each time. I'm afraid that desert's impossible to cross.
But the PCs have just the tools for the job. As soon as Aang and crew realize they have the solution, they can't help but announce it.
Professor, would you like to see our sky bison?
And that's good DMing. You want the party to take the leap on their own. Here I feel I need to take just a minute and explain what a 5-room dungeon is. I know that a lot of my viewers are probably familiar with the concept, but I suspect this will be a new idea for some of the folks watching this particular video. So, really quickly, the 5-room dungeon is a tool for adventure design. And once you know what it is, you see it all the time in RPGs, video games, and even movies and television. Invented by John Ford, the premise is you can use a pattern of 5 rooms for a quick dungeon crawl. There are a few different variations, but this one is mine. The Guardian is the initial challenge the heroes face upon entry. It is a test of their worthiness. The setback is something that impedes the hero's progress. It could be a trap or a dead end, or an environmental feature for the party to overcome. The twist is usually a story or narrative event that runs counter to the group's expectations. Typically, rather than testing the hero's physical capabilities, it is a roleplay or a mental challenge. The boss is just that. It's the moment the heroes face the chief antagonist and reach the climax of the adventure. And the treasure is the reward or revelation the characters get for going on the journey. Traditionally in D&D, it's gold or magic items, but it could also be a MacGuffin or something else that the characters will benefit from. The 5-room dungeon is nice because it gives you lots of different beats. It's an easy way to add some narrative texture. The 5-room dungeon provides a framework, and as fans of this channel know, I am a big fan of structure and process as a tool for a game design. Because once you have this idea, it's easy to manipulate it in lots of different ways. Maybe you put the treasure before the boss, giving the players the opportunity to snatch the loot and run. Maybe you put a split path where the players have to choose between going to the Guardian or the setback first. Maybe the dungeon has 2 bosses, or maybe the dungeon isn't a dungeon at all, but a city, and each room is a different district or faction. Lots of things to do. You get the idea. The point being, the 5-room dungeon is a very effective method for adventure storytelling, and the library episode is a great example of that in action. Contrary to what you might be thinking, the Guardian for this dungeon isn't the Guardian Spirit at all. It's the things that are preventing the party from getting there in the first place. As said it before, the location is lost. They'll have to scour the desert for it, which, as we learned in the previous scene, is a potentially dangerous place. After a bit of overland travel, the group passes their survival checks and avoids the random encounter. Sokka rolls highest on his perception, and the Avatar gang find the library. The library is out in the desert and it's very deep in the sand. The party has to find their way in instead of just walking through the door. They have to climb to the only exposed part, the highest tower, which is also the part with the longest fall. And this is cool. In my opinion, one of the must-have features of a great adventure is a memorable location. And having the secret library be buried deep underground is one of the things that turns this adventure from good to great. And it serves as a really nice setup for the climax of the adventure. Then, Toph's player has to leave the table for some reason, and so they make up a reason for her character to sit out this session.
I've held books before, and I gotta tell you, they don't exactly do it for me.
And I suspect later on the DM texted her player to see if she wanted to take part in a dramatic moment. But more on that later. After completing the descent into the dungeon, the heroes meet the powerful spirit Wan Shi Tong, he who knows 10,000 things. Quick shout out to Hector Elizondo for the outstanding voice work. This encounter isn't a fight, but a role-playing challenge. The DM definitely uses the NPC to be the target of the threat, so as to lower the chance of this encounter ending up as a fight.
You should leave the way you came. Unless you want to become a stuffed head of anthropology.
It's in 2 parts, and Sokka's player rolls nothing but dirt in both of them. In the first bit, the group has to prove themselves worthy of entry. Wan Shi Tong doesn't like visitors to his library, and the reason why is the central conflict of this adventure. What the Guardian wants is exactly opposed to what Sokka wants. This sets the whole tone and ratchets up the tensions and puts the characters in an impossible situation. Everyone is aware of the sword of Damocles hanging over the party's collective heads. First, they foolishly try to deceive the spirit, and on top of that, Sokka rolls a 1 with disadvantage.
If you're going to lie to an all-knowing spirit being, you should at least put some effort into it.
But with some clever thinking and drawing on Aang's background, the player managed to pass the next check and move on to stage 2. Luckily, the second part is there purely for fluff. They have to give the Guardian something to add to his collection. And even after throwing the party a bone by having the NPC lead by example, Sokka still manages to mess this one up. The penalty, though, is only being the butt of a joke. Some good-natured ribbon between pals is one of the best parts of playing D&D. As the characters explore the dungeon, the drama begins to unfold. After a bit of well-placed foreshadowing by the DM, Sokka finally rolls high enough to discover a clue about the Fire Nation. He convinces the group that despite Wan Shi Tong, they have to try to use this clue to find information and to help defeat the big bad evil guy and his army. But as they navigate the dungeon to the wing of Fire Nation history, their hopes of a quick win are crushed. What they want has been destroyed. Instead of a clue leading to a powerful prize, they get nothing. And in a bit of brilliant DMing, a fox appears that will lead the party to a planetarium. Having given the players just enough rope to hang themselves, the DM leads them to the gallows. Even as Katara's player realizes the peril, the lure of knowledge is too much for them to resist. Now in the planetarium, the players can have what they want, but only after they work and solve a puzzle. And more importantly for the setback, only after they've been tattled on. The tension that's been building this whole dungeon finally comes rushing out in a moment of terror. The spirit of the library knows Sokka broke his promise, and that betrayal comes with a price. With some great dialogue, the DM dismisses any chance of the PCs talking their way out of this one.
You think you're the first person to believe their war was justified?
And then, with a chilling dismissiveness, the epic climax unfolds.
And now, I am going to protect what I love.
This is a great example of using all 3 axes of combat in a boss fight. The shelving and corridors of the battle space make for some engaging terrain features. The complete power difference between Wan Shi Tong and Katara, and the need to protect a helpless NPC creates a distinct mechanical challenge, where the solution isn't just raw power. And doing all of this as a way of distracting Wan Shi Tong so part of the party can split off and race against time, as the library is sinking, creates a strong narrative tension. The story and roleplay isn't paused in the fight, it continues throughout it. While Katara is engaged with the boss, Sokka and Aang rush off to get the real treasure. Back in their planetarium, their efforts for coming to this place pay off, and they are rewarded with a great revelation. What I like about this treasure is that it's unexpected. When Team Avatar came to the library, they, like a lot of parties, didn't know exactly what they were after. They had this vague goal of information, and the DM used that as a way to introduce a valuable plot point. After getting the treasure, Sokka rejoins the fight and lands a crit, finishing off the boss, and Team Avatar narrowly escapes the sinking library. Only the NPC is doomed to a tragic demise.
I could spend an eternity in here.
Outside, instead of savoring their victory and making immediate use of their intelligence, they are met with terrible news.
Where's Appa?
Toph's player had to make an impossible choice between saving them or saving Appa. Toph's player was hopefully a co-conspirator in this. You shouldn't force inter-character conflict on the players without their consent. But now the party can't just go back to fighting the Fire Nation, they have to spend the next session plotting and planning. Now they have an immediate and urgent goal, one that they're going to spend all week fretting over, meaning they can't wait to play the next session. Yeah, that's it. That's the video, folks. Stick around real fast. I want to tell you about this week's sponsor, the adventure Prey of the Black Wolf. This is a full Ravenloft adventure for you to drop in your Grimdark campaign. And something that I really appreciate about it is that you can tell it was made with a lot of love. There is a fully fleshed out town filled with scores of NPCs and really detailed locations. There's also new locations and monsters that are just pure gothic horror Ravenloft. The adventure is around 70 pages long, so it's going to take you a few sessions to play, and it's on DM's Guild, so I really suggest you check that out. But if you like this video, there are of course some things you can do to show it, like, share, subscribe, and of course there's my $1 Patreon where I put all of my live streams and other things. And if you have some thoughts on how you can turn Avatar into a D&D adventure, be sure to let me know in the comments below.